everyone. Welcome in to the Umbron Informants podcast. I'm here. I'm the Ever Blight, aka Paul, here with Storm. Storm, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, I am Storm, also known as I go by other names, but just call me Storm, and I have no issue with that.
Well, we're here to talk about deck archetypes in the game of Lightseekers. Storm, you want to run us through the three main archetypes that we see in many other trading card games?
Yeah, so in a lot of other card games, we have things. You have aggro, which is the hit the ground running, fast, hard, blow your opponent up as quickly as possible sort of strategy. You have control, which is keep the game slow, make your opponent play at your pace, and eventually they just can't kill you, and you whittle them down over the course of the game.
Sure,
Or sometimes you
resource
have
denial. Yeah, really heavy on resource denial.
yeah, resource denial for sure. And then you have mid range, which is sort of it's not super fast. They play bigger threats, but they're like cheaper, bigger threats, and they're able to survive into the late game. And they kind of have a mix of control in there by being able to answer the board state, yada yada.
Yeah. So I think it's important to line out aggro, control, and mid range, which is kind of a combination of both. But then there's also different. I don't want to say different types because this is really only for control, and we can start there if you'd like. But different types of control decks, like combo control, I think is very relevant in Lightseekers.
I agree with that.
When I say combo, I don't mean combo like the card type. I mean combo like a combination of cards or effects that work together to essentially eviscerate your opponent in one go.
Right.
I'm thinking of the now classic UK Nationals winning Granite deck list, right? It was
exactly. Yeah.
And that didn't play with necessarily as much resource denial as it did like a resource rebuff, right? Like it could take anything at the time that you could throw at it. Zalana Bloodroot really challenges that deck at this point. I played a match the other day against Zalana Bloodroot while I was running Granite, but at the time it was exterior defenders and mountain forts and boulder feasts and emergency systems, right? And you just couldn't get through that wall. And then all of a sudden, they had drawn their entire deck, and now they're, here's Wrath of the Mountain with 2 Shattered Volcanoes out. You're taking something silly like 31 damage or something. It's insane. Absolutely insane. So that's more of a combo, right? They can just one turn kill you, regardless of what your health is at. We see that in some of the Trianu mimicking horror builds as well.
Yeah, with Treetop Tribunal or Vine Lash.
Yeah, and then mimicking horror dealing. So it's like deal 16 Treetop Tribunal, and then hit them for another 16 with mimicking horror. Have fun with that 32 damage. It's just insane. So that's kind of the combo. When I say combo control, that's kind of what I mean. Can you think of another classic control deck, right, that makes them play at your speed, kind of denies them resources?
As for like actual classic control lists, I think, and as young of a game as Lightseekers is, and my opinion, I think you mean Granite and old school Trianu, like those are the two what I would define as the control decks. There are other things, but I think once you get farther down on the list, that's when you start actually reaching. I think those are more mid-range decks.
Yeah.
Right? Like Sun Hunter Tuktu, I guess, could be classified as sort of a control-ish type deck, but I think it's more closely to mid-range.
Yeah, no, I would say that's the original mid-range. The only other deck that came to mind, and this is a newer version, it's a riff on Trianu, and instead of the mimicking horror build, it runs Astral. It runs Subjugators.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so you can't remove their buffs
I
because
thought
it's
you were talking about the Abyss Tentacles version, like which is just better Sicario.
yeah, no,
But
that's definitely a more aggressive build. Abyss
yeah,
Tentacles is an aggressive card. No, this one is Astral, and it's
okay,
I've run into it online a couple of times. Shout out if that's your brew because it's fantastic. But it just runs subjugators. And what it does is it's the classic Triano build with um, a couple of the animal cards and then the animal buff that makes everything do +3, right? So
right
now
with the insect
insect
swarm
swarm,
and
right? Except not only do they have um, spectral web to keep you from removing their buffs, they shut down their worst enemy, which is a hyper aggro deck, by running out subjugators so that you can't attack. And then instead of root singering, right, they're going to root singer back something. It's probably that subjugator. It's absolutely filthy.
yes, yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay, so yeah, root singer to get back because subjugators have burn. Okay, um, that's really good.
Yeah, I
Really
had
good to
them.
understand.
Like I said, I'm the Everblight. So if you played me in this match, GG's. It was a competitive gold ranked match. Not too long ago. Since this video came up, it might have been a week and a half ago, and man, I believe I was playing Zuna, right? Super, like really hyper aggro, just play testing some stuff out, and I had him down to like less. It was less than 5 health. It might have been 2 or 3, and he dropped a subjugator, and I was like, okay, I'll wait. And then and now he starts to heal up a little bit. All right, I've still got the gas for it. And then he brings back the subjugator, and then he plays another subjugator, and then another subjugator, and the root singer comes out to get back subjugator to play subjugator. And I could not attack for the rest of the game, and had 0 defend cards or buffs that could do damage. It was
Yeah,
insane. And he finished me off with something like 25 health. It was, you know what I mean? And I had him down to nothing, skin of his teeth. But that's how powerful that deck is, right? That's what we're
right.
talking about. That's a
Junior's lost to
control
the
deck.
game at that point. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's right. It was almost a prison style control deck where you lock them out of the game and they just can't do anything about it. And I had no outs, right? If you're playing
gosh,
blue,
that's scary. So, yeah, I mean, imagine once the game gets to the point of like 3-color heroes, or if you're playing like a dual color hero. I believe subjugator, that's lunar, right?
it's possible. Yeah, it's one
All
of the
right, because
astral elements.
okay, well, actually I can pull it up right here. Subjugator is lunar. So okay, yeah, that brings us back on the Fairpain can't wield items, which is good. Otherwise, that'd be kind of nuts because then you have the access to Root Singer, Subjugator, and if you were gonna like splash for Crystal Core, God forbid, oh gosh, you'd also get Geohatchling.
Yeah, yeah. No, so that covers control. I think you're right. I don't think there's necessarily a classic control list that is completely resource denial. I think some people have tried to play with it, and I know we have the cards for it, but they may be spread out across too many elements, right? I
Yeah,
know there's a
I know Storm does really well with like hand control.
yeah, yeah,
Especially in wind. Wind, in my opinion, is the absolute strongest control color.
interesting.
Right. I mean, that's in my opinion, right? You got the Thunderslug, you have Windseer, which is one of the cards of the game that guarantees you information and your opponent getting rid of a card from their hand. You have
Mary Bard.
her Maribard, which is just disgusting.
Yep.
It's probably one of the best anti-buff cards. Helps you get around fucking Spectral Web. Turns off things like Tree, so you can still get rid of cards like Treetop Tribunal.
Yeah.
And then you also get Hurricane Elemental, which is that card. It's a little slow right now, but I mean the card is
In the right deck.
absolutely ridiculous.
Sure.
Right in the right deck.
Yeah.
Kashi or any sort of, or with that key. With the new key that was released in Kindred, that ability is to rotate and forward.
Fiscus, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean that really, really helps out cards like that give tremendous effects, but their drawback is being slower.
Fiscus Key. Yeah.
Fiscus Key does an
Fiscus.
excellent job of helping speed that up.
Yeah, interesting. So that's the general idea of control, right? You make them play at your speed so that you can set up something absolutely degenerate to win the game to do yourself, whether that's locking them out, not letting them play, or you know what I mean, something really unfair like that, or if it's just hitting them in one turn with a combo or something to take them from high to mid 30s to zero, one shot.
Yeah, or if you do the Abyss Tentacle, the Trianu tentacle list, right? Like that, I would consider that a control list. It just sits there, it stays alive, it controls the board state till and it's healing you at one point until eventually you're getting hit for 2 to 3 every turn, then 4 to 6 every turn, and then
Sure.
it just slowly goes from
the original Trianu list. Just whittles you down. I believe that was Dr. Attila's list, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But it combines the sort of having your insect swarms out with the increase all power stuff combined with the Abyss Tentacle.
Yeah, that's the new, and that's his new version. He's the one that brought that to Gen Con, to U.S. Nationals of 2018.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
He originally, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's Dr. Attila's because he played TPK games, and TPK was known for his Cassini list, which he brought, which I top 4'd the qualifier with and just missed Nationals. 3 Dolo decks, and I was the only non-Dolo deck in the top 4. I played Cassini.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was his deck list that I took, and then he played in the finals. He played. I think he may have banned Trianu. His opponent TPK banned Trianu because he's the Trianu player, right? So,
right.
Anyways, that's neither here nor there. So that's control. The other kind of the antithesis, if you will, of control would be aggro. And like you said earlier, that's kind of the hit the ground running. And I think it's a more popular archetype. Because it's a bit easier to pilot than a control deck, right? Control decks take a lot of concentration. You have to know your plays. You have to know your outs. You have to understand what your opponent is trying to do in order to deny them those specific resources. An aggro deck is just stab damage. Yeah, it's just stab damage to the face.
You just throw cards at your opponent's face and hope you get there before you...
Yeah, so whether that's... setting up a quick Colossi Ritual site with a Draga Scorcher to hit them for 9 the next turn, and then having 2 actions to get both of your stab damage cards increased by 3. That was a classic Dolo, and Dolo's kind of the quintessential aggro.
I think
hero.
Mountain and Tech. Are just
very
probably
aggressive.
The 2 most aggressive orders.
And I think Astral can be included depending on how you build it.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I agree with that. I think there's a lot of potential on Sunstrider. I think we're really, really close, if not already there, and just haven't found it yet for Sunstrider to really take the cake on that sort of astral style of aggression.
Yeah, let me...
It's the one that does 3 damage plus 1 for every card you've played this turn.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Especially with how...
and especially with how Astral works.
Yeah, with how Astral works with extra actions, and, they're just getting better and better cards. Give them extra actions, they're able to loot them more efficiently.
Yeah. So, we talked about aggro, right? That's easier. It's an easier conversation to have, than control, right? Control's a more complex idea. Aggro is just as much damage as fast as possible. And it's easy to pick the better card in an aggro deck because it is an action-based economy. So if you understand how to play the game, you understand you get 2 actions per turn. You know, you want to maximize the amount of damage you can do during each of those actions. So it's easier to see that a card that does 3 damage and heals you for 3 may not be in the vein of what you want for an aggro deck versus a card that just straight up deals 6 damage. Right? Now, there's something to be said for the life point swing, right? Both of those are a 6-point life point swing, but it doesn't matter if you're at 1 life as long as your opponent's at 0 life.
Right.
And that's kind of what I feel like the mantra of an aggro deck would be, which is why Tech really gets the nod, right? Because they have a bunch of like self-inflicted wounds built into that.
Yeah, they
extremely reckless.
But as a drawback, take some damage themselves, but they don't care because they're doing more damage than you are.
Yeah.
Even with the drawback. The usual downside to aggro is that they're blowing through all their cards really quickly. They have to take turns to restock, but it's very interesting in Lightseekers. That drawback seems to be non-existent with cards like Umbron Informant.
Yeah.
So it allows aggro players to literally dump their hand, and then say you're a mid-range player, you're probably sitting on six-ish cards at that point, maybe 5 to 7. If you're like a mid-range player, and then all of a sudden, after the aggro player has hit you for 12 to 20 to 10 to 20 damage.
Yep.
They then draw 6 or 7 more cards.
Yeah, they've exhausted their resources, and you're just holding those cards is going to allow an Umbron Informant to sneak in. And even if Umbron Informant isn't the best, some new stuff came out in Kindred. Umbron Barkeep, heal for 2, draw 2 cards if they're holding more cards than you at all. And any number of cards is more than 0, which is probably what the aggro player tends to hold. And, worst case, you take a turn off, draw 2, and then hit him for 12 again next turn. So that's aggro. And it's interesting to say that I do agree that's the downfall. What do you say the downfall to a control deck would be then?
So it's interesting because usually aggro trumps control in any card.
Yeah.
But I personally don't feel that's the case with Lightseekers. Just because of the potency of the defensive-based cards in the game. Damage reduction effects, almost all healing effects heal for at least 6. Almost all. There are a lot of lesser ones that tell you added things. Or if you are also like Storm, for example, has like Confuse Shaman, right? Heals you for 7.
Yeah.
Heals your opponent for 4. As a control player, you don't really care that your opponent's gaining 4 health at that point in the game. You just want the extra point of life, which is very important.
Yeah. We'll think like emergency systems and Tyrax Fixer as well.
Yeah. Those cards that, like, while you're less than 15 health, heal for 7 instead of 4, right? And so it's just, and you're going to outlast a sort of aggressive player as long as you have all those defensive things that a control deck usually has.
Yeah.
Now, the downside is that now that mid-range is sort of coming into fruition, that is where control is actually going to probably struggle a bit more with, because mid-range is now getting to the point. It used to not be the case with just the first 2 sets, but mid-range is now starting to come to the point to where not only can they answer the things on board that prevent them from doing as much damage as they could, they also have consistent threats. They're not really going empty-handed all that often. They are also just there to kind of get you, and you're going to run out of answers for it. A good mid-range deck is going to have enough sticky threats, whether it be they have a bunch of buffs and there's only a limited amount of buff removal, or whether they have a significant version, and you can't really prevent them from recurring what they need to have against you. They have more can-take threats, right? Because a control player is usually spending a lot of time drawing cards, but...
And I think it's interesting. Shout out to Steels McDeals, a.k.a. Tyler, because you said that. I'm sorry. He's changed his name online. It's no longer Steels McDeals. It's Rojo for Dolo.
Rojo for
Rojo for
Dolo.
Dolo.
Yep.
I just checked his online handle. AKA Tyler. Yeah, he was helping me play test the other day for an upcoming ACG down in Texas, and he busted out a Zalana Bloodroot deck. And we haven't, there was a lot of stuff. We haven't seen a lot of this stuff online yet. So it remains to be seen how good it was. Because Kindred comes out at the end of the week this week online.
Yeah,
but
so
it is insane. So he splashes blue for whatever the air item is from the toy, one of them.
Tempest Rod?
Tempest Rod. Discard 2 cards, remove a buff.
To make Templo,
and Zalana Bloodroot wants you to remove buffs because you get to draw cards when you remove a buff. So it was just the best brew I think I had seen recently, and that was a very mid-range deck, like you're talking about. I think a lot of mid-range stuff showed up with Kindred. Farapang is a nice mid-range deck. There's a lot of, and I think
I think the downside to Tempest Rod usually is that you're 2-for-1ing yourself, right? To whereas Zalana makes it to where it's a 1-for-1.
Feels less bad.
Which is never bad.
Feels less bad for sure. And especially if you're removing something critical, now it feels really good.
Right.
Yeah, and then like I said, Farapang is kind of a tempo-y mid-range deck, right? I've seen a couple of decks, specifically again Rojo for Dolos, where it's he's just go fishing his deck, right? They have all of the support for beasts, and you're gonna Farapang, you're gonna draw a card face up. It's probably a beast. I think he hits like 85%. Right. So he takes a point of damage, and he has 2 actions and an extra card in hand. And now he can. There's cards that go into your deck and pull out your favorite beast card. He's running Moonlight Burrower, right? So you can look at the top 4 and draw one of those cards, gain an additional action, mind you, because the majority of the deck is obviously green, not yellow. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that stuff, a lot of those synergies. And then you have classic mid-range decks, like I mentioned, TPK Gaming, his Cassini builds, I would say, are classically mid-range, maybe even on the aggressive side of mid-range, but they're doing a lot of stuff. The Flying Fortress builds, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and that's
Flying Fortress, Stellar Fusion, like that is, first of all, good. Okay. Like the fact that the damage increasing effects are really good already. Damage increasing effects that you can't remove are really good. Damage increasing effects that are more than 3 that last for 3 turns are just
insane.
Yeah.
Insane. And then because Flying Fortress is passive damage dealing, it's just you combo that off and
it's free action. Like Flying Fortress is free actions, right? It's just every time for those of you who aren't aware, it does. Whenever you draw a card, if it's a defend card, you can reveal it, right? And it deals damage to your opponent, which will then, it's a clunky or so to rotate. So it happens 4 times, right? But you are essentially getting 4 actions off of 1 card, and the thing is those actions can, it's not like you're forced to only get one of them per turn. Like you can trigger potentially, all 4 corners in a single turn.
Easily off of an Umbron format, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so and
what really makes that deck hum is that half of the actions are draw effects. So Shapeshifters draw a card face up. So not only are you getting the 5 damage or 5 healing from Shapeshifter, but now you're also dealing additional damage in some cases with Flying Fortress, right? If it's a defend card, and that's how the deck's built, and it's fantastic. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about mid-range, and you alluded to this earlier, and I'd like to hear your full thoughts on it. In traditional trading card games, how does aggro, mid-range, and control stack up? And then in Lightseekers, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said this, I think in most other trading card games, two-part question. In most other trading card games, healing, spike healing, is bad. It's not good. You'd rather be doing something with your resources other than spike healing. Here, spike healing is not only very important, it's good. And I think that has thrown the traditional
borderline required.
Yeah, and that I think that has thrown the traditional hierarchy, right? The traditional rock paper scissors, if you will, out of alignment. So, two-part question: How did you see that rock paper scissors for aggro, mid range, and control in most TCGs, and how do you think it is in Lightseekers, and why?
Okay, so in your traditional, let's use Magic the Gathering example, really popular game. It is usually aggro beats control because control needs setup time.
It's so slow,
and aggro just comes across and just crushes them hard.
Steamrolls
before they even get a chance to build their empire, right? And then you have control usually beats mid range because mid-range isn't fast enough. Mid-range is also trying to build its own settlement, right, in order its walls and stuff like that.
It's a combination of aggro and control, right? It has
aggro and control, but control just controls it better. It's weak because control allows control to build up, and then you have the reverse where aggro loses to mid-range because mid-range is faster at setting up their sort of you can't crush me right away, right?
Sure.
And then plays bigger threats than the aggro.
100%.
Right? So the aggro deck can't beat them fast enough before it starts slamming bigger things.
So they get overtaken. Yeah. It's like they're both off to a race, and aggro starts out the game much faster, but the mid-range deck just has a more powerful engine, so on a long stretch, it's just going to blow right by them.
Yeah, mid-range is better. Mid-range, I mean... Yeah, we went over that. Aggro is good for sprinting, control is good for a marathon, and mid-range is hybrid in between.
Yeah. So how do you see it in Lightseekers then? Is that
Lightseekers? That's what
throttled?
Right. Yeah, that's where we see that it's an entire switcheroo in Lightseekers. Right. It's just completely flipped upside down to where you have the control decks that are able to beat the aggro decks, the aggro that's good against mid-range, because I think mid-range is just in a very rough spot right now. And then you have mid-range going against control. And the reason I think that is just because of the dynamic of the game is that, control players don't have to build anything up in this game, right? It's an action economy-based game. You have access to everything you want to play immediately. So control can, they don't have to wait to put the walls up.
Sure, it's not a resource economy like you were saying in Magic, right? You have to play one land per turn, so you have to build up your resources. Here, everyone has the same amount of resources, and you have actions. Sure, okay, right.
So and then you have working backwards here. You then have aggro beating mid-range, right? Because, again, same reason. Everybody has access to the same actions, but the issue is that mid-range, right? Mid-range actually is setting something up, right? Mid-range is mid-range because they use the benefits of buffs to give extra actions. They use the benefits of, trying to somewhat deny resources, but not enough to put control off tilt. Or to put aggro off tilt.
Sure.
And so
no, I think that's interesting.
So aggro is able to run them over because mid range does have to set up, unlike other.
I see what you're saying. In this game. Yeah, no. So I think what you're getting at is a lot of mid range decks are mid range because they're attempting to abuse synergies between cards, right? So you want to, and whereas control can automatically start putting a damper on your resources. So you can throw
Right.
your 6 damage, spike damage card at Control's face, but if they have a damage reduction buff out or something of that nature,
Damage reduction combined with any form of healing, it's like, okay, yeah, spend your action to hit 3 damage because, I have a wall out, right? And then I'm just going to heal for 6 the next turn. So in the course of, we each took 1 action, I net, right? And that's the downside, going into the aggro. Now, and that's why aggro can kind of run over mid-range, is mid-range, because of the synergies that it's trying to explore. Moving over to mid-range versus control, thing is a lot of control stuff is spike healing, things of that sort. They have their walls and stuff like that. But the thing is that control doesn't put enough pressure on mid-range. So mid-range gets a chance to build up, right? That's the reverse scenario. Mid-range gets its chance that it needs to build up, and the synergies of the cards that it has outweigh the control players in game by a great deal.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point, and I could see that, especially when you're talking about if you're running a lot of buff removal, because control, like you're saying, does really rely on specific buffs. Like Control's decks are buff heavy decks. They want to reap the benefits over time, and if you're not just playing your 3 main order buff removal cards, right? You're playing extra stuff because you're cross order, or you're splashing an item like we mentioned earlier. Now you have additional buff removal. You can really consistently tear them apart, and especially if you know what they're trying to do, right? And that's why Spectral Web inadvertently is such a good card, because you can't remove their buffs, and that's what they need to survive and thrive, right? That's their lifeblood. So
yeah, and a lot of people, there's a lot of hate that goes towards Spectral Web. I as much as like the card is tough, right? I am personally on the edge. I don't think it's an overpowered card. I'm not a nature player, right? And I still don't think the card is overpowered, right? I think there are I am. It is a coincidence, I swear. I do prefer Storm as probably one of my favorites orders. But so I might be a little biased here, but because of access to Mari Bard, right? So, but I've never had an issue personally with Spectral Web, right? I have answers to those things. Thunder Slug is a phenomenal card, right? Compared with Mari Bard, that silences their half of the board basically, or makes all their buffs dormant. But also Tech has answers to Spectral Web, right? By being able to rotate Spectral Web. It doesn't remove it, it just rotates it.
And that's crucial, right? Being able to hit it with like a Chrono Warper or what is it, Time Flicker or something. And Fountain of Time. That's what it is. Fountain of Time or a Chrono Warper, and rotate it to its X'd corner so that you can follow up with a Crazed Bomber. What a blowout.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so and I'm sure they'll put other things in different verse that can also do stuff like that. But I mean, I think that's enough in my mind, right? Like those are that is enough to answer it. You don't want so much. You don't want to homogenize the orders, because then none of the orders feel unique.
Sure, absolutely. And I think they did a really good job balancing answers and orders against each other. So that's a fantastic segue, by the way. Let's talk about back to the archetypes. Are there orders that can play both, or more than one, or all 3 archetypes?
And that's
and are there orders that lend themselves to one or the other specifically?
So I do think that there are both, right? And both those things are true.
And I think it's very hero dependent. But go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Yeah, of course, heroes are a big deal, but we're talking generally order-wise here. Some heroes will push certain orders to do something out of the ordinary, right? And those are very unique heroes. But what we are discussing is just general orders. I do think Mountain is a phenomenal example. When we were talking about earlier, you said there was like a Dolo aggro deck.
Yeah.
But Dolo also is, or Dolo makes it more aggressive because you're able to get cards, and that's a Mountain hero. But you also have Granite. Granite is a control card, right, in Mountain. And Mountain has so many good defensive cards on top of good aggressive cards, where Mountain specifically can go either way, depending on what you're doing. But then you have things like Tech, right? I don't think I have ever seen a non-aggro Tech list.
Sure, I would say there's some mid-range decks, right, that are trying to, again, like we were talking about, use these synergies where they've got like Colossi Cannon and Fountain of Time, right, or Maniacal Machine and Fountain of Time. They want to spin their buffs and restart their buffs and capitalize on these things, right, with these synergies. I think it's closer to a mid-range than an aggro, but I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
The one I was leaning towards was Storm specifically. To me, feels like a mid-range deck through and through.
So I will.
With the exception of unique heroes, i.e., Sergeant Thunderfin, right, which would be an aggro build. Right. I think the majority.
I will have to disagree with that.
Sure.
Because you have Bubbles, for instance, right? Online, like Bubbles aggro was a thing, right? It was, like there's no reason. Like Bubbles and the hero itself doesn't do anything phenomenal, right? But like that was an aggro deck that kind of went through. And Shellguard Tuna, right? That looks like a downside, right? You can't play, the downside to playing Shellguard Tuna is that you can't play 3 or 4 cost combos. But like it doesn't matter because you're planning on playing 2 cost combos because you're trying to be aggressive. There are Storm aggro decks that are faster than Tech aggro decks. Whenever I was brewing up Shellguard Tuna, I went against the Tempest aggro deck or Zuna aggro deck for Zuna. And
Zuna is the superior hero, but continue.
Yeah.
Don't at me. Don't at me.
But yeah, and then Shellguard, again, it wasn't because of Shellguard Tuna that you got there, but you built it in an aggressive manner. And, especially with cards like Storm Shaman. Storm Shaman just takes a single turn of setup, right?
Yeah.
But it is insane the damage increase you get
from
that.
Sure. And especially having superiority in the lightning element with Shellguard Tuna, that would, and you're playing, the drawback isn't a drawback because you can't play 3 or 4 cost combos, but you're trying to be low to the ground and fast anyways.
Yeah, sure. So it's not even a drawback. And on top of that, you also get to the point, you brought up superiorities.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. Having, but you can also kind of gauge what you're doing with, because we bring us 2 elements and whatnot. You can gauge whether this type of hero is meant to be aggressive or meant to be built defensively, looking at their superiorities. Because every single card that you look at, if you look at a hero, every hero has their elements that you can use on them.
Yeah, the 3.
Now, if you
left,
notice,
middle, and
if
right.
you pay attention to certain cards, each element on every order has its job. Okay, so if you were to and what you could tell by the position of the element on the card. So if you look at the far left-hand element, for nature that's animal, for astral that's solar, for storm that's lightning, so on and so forth. You just look at the left card. All right, that is the aggressive element of that order.
Sure, that's your spike damage.
The left side element. Pardon me. The left side element that's the aggro element. If you have a hero that has superiority in that element, that is going to be an aggressive. And then you have your middle element, which is the center element. Every single order's center element is their defensive element, right? It has to do with healing. It does damage reduction. It has like a number of really good, like the Finn cards in that element. Things of that sort. That is your that's where all your defense comes from. If you have superiority in that center element, bear in mind that that hero is more likely going to be a defensive hero. And then going over to the right-hand side, that's your utility element, right? You can call it your control element, but I think utility is probably the best word for it, because that's where you get your graveyard recursion, for tech. That's where a lot of the buff rotation comes from. That's,
it's kind of your specialty
that's
stuff.
Also where that's where all of your buff removal goes to as well. Nature, Soul, Reckless Spirit. You have Pathfinder, that's Gravity, I believe.
Correct.
For Astral, Crystal Leech is Crystal, that's the right-hand side. Thunderslug, that's your buff removal there going on that side. Wind, I believe, so you have sometimes there's like a Craze Bomber, I believe, is explosives, right?
Right, and that's on the aggro side, yeah.
Right, and that's on the aggro side. So but that also has a drawback to it. Well, a drawback to it as well.
But if you think about tech, time is on the right hand side in tech,
right?
And that's what rotates all of the buffs. So it's buff control. It's not buff removal necessarily.
Right, buff control, I guess would be the. So that's where you get utility. Same thing with Dread, right? Shadow Puff and Shadow, and so that's every single all the elements. Just that's how they align. So it's really easy to sort of just tell what certain heroes are meant to be played as, or how they were designed.
Sure.
By looking at superiority.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think there's other things that lead you to that conclusion, right? Their abilities, their starting health total, any drawbacks they might have, stuff like that can kind of push you to where that hero wants to be as well. Thinking about Granite, right? Granite also had that. It's quintessential, right? It has superiority in Earth, and when you read its ability, it's just obvious and clear. Like, you want to draw all of the cards and then finish them swiftly after that.
Yep. Right? I do agree.
Good deal. Anything else you want to add as far as archetypes, heroes, orders, decks that are coming out? Like I said, I think Kindred is going to be big.
Heroes, so one hero that I undervalued a great deal whenever it was first released, because whenever it was first released, I looked at all the buffs that were in its colors and its thing, and that were relevant to its ability, and I was like, this actually is a really trash hero. It was a dual order hero, and it was Bloom and Scorch. Oh. Everybody else was really excited for Bloom and Scorch. All right, but if you go look at Bloom and Scorch face value, and go look at the buffs face value, right, there's not a lot of benefits you get from it. Its ability isn't very good considering the nature buffs that you have access to. All of nature's really good, like damaging buffs, those are animal cards, right? And so that's the hard part. Like if Bloom and Scorch had Earth instead of Forest and Animal instead of Fire, Bloom and Scorch would be absolutely busted. But because of your lack of aggressive buffs to put into play, it makes it a lot harder for Bloom and Scorch to be good. Now, a way to solve this issue is Eagle Horn Bow. The new, or is it Eagle Horn Bow? The new bow that just came out. Eagle Beak Bow. My apologies. Like, that gives you your access to animal. It gives you superiority in it as well. It has a good ability attached to it. And this card right there significantly improves the power level of Bloom and Scorch, right? Because it gives you access to it. It becomes more of a beast matters deck, kind of like Farapang, right? But it's a different end of it, right? It's able to put buffs out faster than Farapang, but Farapang gives more control over your deck, and has a lot more recursion and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's an example of a hero that if you look at the card base values, and also kind of shows a little bit on how items can really affect a hero. Sure,
no, that's an interesting point, because like you're saying, that's such a powerful ability. Remove a buff. Well, I'm done with my Draga Scorcher, so let me remove it and put 2 force buffs into play. But man, what do you want to even play
Right.
You know what I mean? That's rough. I mean, Moss Ridge Defender, okay, cool.
Right.
Pollen
The thing,
Weaver got banned,
if
right?
you look at the animal buffs though, like the animal buffs are
Insane.
ridiculoly good.
Insane.
Morbid Conspiracy, yeah, Hunger Beam is fine, but then you get over to like Vicious Scale Fang. That's a great card. But the good thing is that you do have access to Soul, so you do get access to like the other beast buff, right? The one that cares about the amount of buffs you have in play.
Oh, sure.
The Zealfang buff, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is in this style of deck, you're going to have more buffs in play than your opponent, ideally, right? Especially if you're getting 2 for the price of 1. All right, and so, but yeah, so that's just a quick example of heroes that I feel are a little bit under the radar.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of these dual order heroes are going to start to get like there's like so many. I know the new purple red one. Let me see, mythic hero,
purple red
Kindred.
Yeah.
Let's talk about these guys. Magrock the Imbuer.
Let's go into dual order heroes here real quick and kind of.
Well, here, let's do all of them. Let's look at all the dual orders and see what we think here. So I got mythic.
Before we move on to dual, quick, while you're looking those up, I do want to point out a hero that I think is extremely powerful, and I think we'll see a lot of advanced constructed play. Probably some really good, probably some solid like 1v1 play as well, but I think advanced constructed specifically is Archmos. As long as you have more buffs than your opponent, their hero trait is dormant.
Oh, interesting.
That hero, right? I think that's a hero that will have more impact on the advanced constructed side as opposed to the basic constructed side, or even online.
Well, online is essentially advanced constructed without the mini game, right? It's game one type format.
Right. So I think I guess Archmos could do well in online as well, but I definitely think like in paper, like basic constructed is.
Yeah.
But I think because we'll do that later. But off to dual order heroes.
Yeah, we have a look. So heroes that have been around that I was, General Carnage I don't think saw enough love. I think he can be broken, especially now that Kindred came out and they gave us all those new items. I think he got a huge power increase because of that.
Yeah, all the items that come out just make General Carnage better. I think the only downside to General Carnage is those items would make him a really good control deck. But the problem is it's a control deck that needs to set up. And therefore you are now weak on both ends. Mid-range will beat you and aggro will beat you. Because you require setup where the true control list that we have now, they have access to everything they need access to. The fact that he puts the card on top of your deck really hurts him.
Yeah.
Right? He really should have made it to where the card goes to your hand. Right? It's good that it doesn't put into play like Blacksmith does, and then also refunds an action. But the fact of the matter is that just to have the hand, you have to take 2 damage and use all of your actions
to get
one to activate the ability, and then one to actually draw. And I think that's his weakest point.
No, that's interesting, and it's you can't use 2 abilities a turn, so it's not like you can take your first turn and set up an ability that draws you cards, because you need, you're spending an entire turn to set up so that you can set up again next turn so that you can use. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's the biggest downside is General Carnage. It just looks like he has so much potential. But that one line of text, place it on top of the deck, is so detrimental.
Yeah. So of the second wave, the obvious Mythic Hero winner was Sun Hunter Tuktu. Right,
Right.
fantastic. Now, close second, I would say, was Captain Blacktail, and I'm not sure what it was missing. But I saw Ezekiel. He's been ranked globally online as number one for a long time. I think he got knocked off a couple weeks ago. He might be back up. I haven't checked, but he's top notch online. He plays. I've watched a couple of streams. He plays a man. I want to say it's a 4-color Captain Blacktail deck. It's insane.
Yeah, that's great.
It's insane.
That's
But it's just such a meme deck, right? It's so
the
trolly.
whole thing is like Captain Blacktail. It's the epitome of. I posted a Captain Blacktail deck list on Reddit. If you guys want to check it out, it's on the Lightseekers subreddit, and it is a tack list, right? It runs ways of punishing your opponent for attacking, making it to where they can't attack, so you can utilize Captain Blacktail's ability. It is the dual superiority on it for both the utility and the defensive element of it is absolutely phenomenal, right? And it's one of those decks where and it has an unconditional, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase this. When you use its ability to deal 3 damage, the 3 damage is unconditional. Granted, yes, it needs to make sure that they don't have an attack card, but a lot of abilities like this do like 2 damage increased by 1 if they have this, right? And so, and I think that is low key a big deal for Blacktail. I don't think enough people have explored Blacktail's potential, especially right now after Kindred. It's kind of like you were saying that Triano list that can just keep on making sure Subjugator happens and whatnot. I think Captain Blacktail has a very similar list that can list potential.
Yeah. So, and I feel like all the other second wave mythical? All the second wave mythical heroes got played around with. At least they saw some love. General Carnage, the Ancient, Zilana Bloodroot. Talk about some of the new heroes here. What do you think is going to be numero uno? Everyone's favorite, third wave hero, Kindred hero.
I would like to. So, honestly, I think it's going to be Farapang. Farapang's the easiest to build around, and it benefits from one of the key mechanics that was implemented in Kindred and has been confirmed to be used throughout the rest of Lightseekers, right? So they're going to have more beast cards in the future. They're not going to stop coming out with families. So every beast card that ever gets printed will only increase will only have a chance to increase the power level of Farapang. Every single one of these other heroes does not utilize the family mechanic, and so therefore I think their power level is fixed.
Interesting, because we talked about Bloom and Scorch, people trying to deal with that, and I know people have been messing around with Farapang.
And that Bloom and Scorch, I guess, is also an exception to that. It's not a fixed power level because any sort of nature card that comes out,
could improve
or Mountain Buffs or anything like that, will also improve that. Whereas all these other heroes, they, Nimi will rotate. It depends on how many good poison cards are out, but that's still reliant on combos, right? Every deck's going to play combo. It does, I still think that's a much smaller room for improvement, gap of improvement, than an entire family.
I think the fan favorite, the brews we're going to see starting at the end of this week, are going to be Thundervine. When you deal damage with a lightning attack, so it's got to be lightning, it's got to be attack, but that's not very narrow because lightning generally is the aggro side.
It is the aggressive card.
Right. You can discard a forest card to increase it by 2.
Right. And there are... and normally, discarding the card would be a downside, but they've implemented a lot of interesting things with the storage mechanic. Kind of like there's a forest card that reduces damage by 2.
Yeah.
And instead of discarding forest cards stored under it to increase the amount of damage that's reduced to you. So therefore, you're not actually losing value on a card. You're able to amplify the effects of other cards with things such as that.
And then utilize your discarded cards for something else. Now, all right, my number one pick, my sleeper, if you will, is Azivak.
So
I don't know about the elements that she's in, but the ability seems degenerate.
So, yes. It is the first repeatable recursion effect.
Graveyard Matters.
Yep. And they've put it on a hero, right?
Can't interact with it.
You can't interact with it.
Well, you can. It's narrow.
Archboss can.
Yeah.
Right, it's narrow, but Archboss can make this dormant, right? So that's, again, another point for Archboss, okay? All right. And
I think there's one about there's another one about abilities too. I'll find it. You keep talking.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So how Azavok is a astral hero that is lunar, is replaced with dread, which is was replaced with death, which is very interesting. Because the death defensive cards I don't think are as good as the lunar cards, but they are unique, which is important. So Azavok has full superiority in solar and death. So I think that it's very interesting to see more of a aggressive. It's an aggressive hero that also is very defensive. So I think this is a very good mid-range hero. And then, which goes along to our previous explanation of what mid-range is. And this has both the aggressive aspect as well as the defensive aspect.
Yep.
And whenever I was talking about sticky threats, this is a perfect example of a sticky threat, right? It makes it to where all of your threats are sticky, right? They can come back for more. You can keep using them. Azavok gifts that keep on giving.
Absolutely.
Right?
So the card I was thinking of, by the way, Kriebel Monk. No heroes can use abilities.
Right, and that's a good sideboard card, right?
Absolutely.
And that's but that hurts. I mean, that hurts you, right?
So number one thing you want to see as far as archetypes, cards we need, cards you want to see that would strengthen some of these archetypes, maybe in the next set. Anything specifically? Types of cards?
They have experimented with it a bit, and I like that they're experimenting with it, and I am looking to seeing more iterations of this idea for hero ability specifically. If you look at Star Tamer Kalik, shuffle your hand back in your deck and draw that many cards. This can only be used once per game.
Yeah,
right?
Like an ultimate ability. Yeah.
Right. So I have two things with this here, with stuff like this. First off, this hero, let's start off with, it's interesting because it has an effect you can only use once per game, right? So it's a matter of, do you wait till later in the game and you have a grip and you're just like, I don't like this, and you shuffle back to get, more to see if you have something better. Hand refreshing effects are nice. But I think what's really important about this card is Lightseekers is a game where not exist.
Where what doesn't exist?
Where mulligans.
Oh, yeah.
Your first starting hand, that's
what you got
with no matter what.
Yep.
And Star Tamer Kalik takes that, and that's not a downside. Star Tamer Kalik gives you the ability to basically mulligan endgame.
Yeah, at any point. Yeah, interesting. But once a game, and I think that's an interesting concept. I'd like to see them do that a little more. That'd be cool, because it could affect anything, right? It could be an aggressive ability, a finisher ability, like a kind of a combo setup type ability. That'd be like an ultimate ability, only used once per game. That's very interesting. I think on my wish list, and I think this is on a lot of people's wish list, is more unaligned, but specifically an unaligned hero or two, just to see what you could do. Because there's Sergeant Thunderfin who utilizes unaligned and wants unaligned cards in the deck, but I think like an Umbron hero and a Kriebel hero would be sick.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I do think that is cool. That does kind of. So there is something I personally would like to see in the game. And a lot of people may disagree with this, but I think personally that you should unaligned cards, right? They should still follow the rule, the element rule, right? Of not being able to play them twice in a turn unless you have superiority.
Interesting.
That is, I think that would be a healthy change for the game.
I don't know.
Because you see, there are a lot of good unaligned card effects, right?
They're very strong ones.
Right, but not having that
handicap
restriction.
Yeah.
Not having, first of all, it's basically every hero has superiority in unaligned, right? And so it really limits the designer's creative freedom or ability to make unaligned cards, because every unaligned card is now forced to be
a little less good.
It has to be either a little less good, or if they make the mistake of making one that's too powerful, or making a couple there, and the more release, the greater the chance of this is that's happening, because about how well they are with every other card, you know. And there's going to come a point to where like unaligned cards can be a lot more powerful than your strictly like your elemental cards, you know. So as a player, we'll have to wait and see.
Watch the power creep. That'll be interesting.
The power creep. But I do like, I already playing against aggro decks find it disheartening to take 12 damage in a turn, and that was from unaligned cards, right? You know, and you know, and
Umbron Marauder pop you for 6, starting hand, and then Frenzied Kriebel pop you for another 6.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, and that's and so I mean, those cards are cards that I would consider powerful enough to like. I don't think unaligned cards should ever be able to do as much damage as a card that has an element.
Interesting,
right? And that's my whole thing is I already am in the mindset that I think unaligned should, because there is no elemental restriction behind it, should be inherently less powerful, or only be utility cards, right?
Right.
You know,
side deck only. Yeah.
Right.
That kind of a feel, at least. All right.
Right.
Well, any shameless plugs for the store or YouTube channel? Like, comment, subscribe below. Storm, you have anything?
Yes. You know, I mean, feel free. We have Storm games. Or, you know, if you want to go like our videos, we have some deck text. We'll be posting this on there as well. I guess you're watching this on YouTube, so we can just
in the future.
In the future. So please like, comment, subscribe below about your thoughts, what we're talking about. And then on top of that, if you play Lightseekers or NS in singles, actually I have a single store online, stormbrewgames.com/shop. And we'll put the link in the description below and whatnot. But I have a lot of singles on there that we sell. I own a shop, and we buy, you know, boxes of the new set and post all of the things online. We try to stay competitive with our prices. We'll match the lowest listing we can find on the web, and that's where we keep our prices at. And then, you know, if you have any cards that you want to get rid of that are not claimed, or if you could unclaim them, you're more than welcome to send those to us, and we'll give credit for those as well. So you can maybe get some free cards off of those too.
Good deal. Yeah. If you're interested in some gameplay, I have some up on some sort of Concord YouTube channel. It's just me rambling to myself as I play Lightseekers and hope my computer or phone doesn't crash in the midst. You can follow me on Twitter at some sort of Concord, and I'll tweet when I go live to stream as well. I'll link my Twitch there, and some of that gameplay will be mirrored here on this YouTube channel as well. So thanks everyone for joining us. We have been the Umbron Informants, and we will catch you all later.